My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and I restore 19th century paintings for museums that trust me with canvases worth more than most houses. 9 years before my sister's wedding, my grandfather spent 146 evenings hand-polishing a tiny silver stethoscope charm that had belonged to his own father, wrapping it in dark blue velvet because he believed every member of our family deserved something that reminded them they belonged, regardless of what career they chose. At exactly 8:17 p.m. on a rainy Thursday, one text message made that little charm feel heavier than iron. 9 years later, at my sister Emily's wedding, I watched my mother staring at that same charm resting against my necklace before she quietly said something I never imagined I would hear. Here's what she didn't know about that wedding night, or about the 9 years that stood silently between us. The Bennett family didn't need a written rulebook. We had something much simpler. The silver stethoscope. Every doctor in the family received one after graduating from medical school. My great-grandfather started the tradition in 1958 after opening a small clinic outside Columbus, Ohio. My grandfather inherited it. Then my father. Then my older cousins. Their tiny silver charms hung from bracelets, necklaces, and keychains during every Thanksgiving, every Christmas dinner, every graduation photograph displayed across the hallway wall. The charm wasn't jewelry. It was membership. If you earned one, you belonged. If you didn't, nobody said anything directly. They simply looked through you. Grandpa Walter never accepted that version of the tradition. After arthritis forced him into retirement at 73, he spent his mornings carving birds from maple wood and his afternoons drinking weak tea on the back porch. He insisted every grandchild deserved a silver stethoscope, even if medicine wasn't their future. People heal in different ways, he'd whisper whenever Mom rolled her eyes. He polished mine himself. I still remember the faint smell of metal polish mixing with peppermint candies in his workshop. At the time, I appreciated his kindness without recognizing how much courage it took for him to quietly disagree with the rest of the family. The uncomfortable truth is that I wasn't only the person being rejected. I helped normalize the system. When cousins joked that artists lived off real people's taxes, I laughed awkwardly instead of speaking up. When Emily proudly announced she wanted to become a pediatric surgeon at 16, I applauded louder than anyone. Every framed medical diploma that replaced family photographs on our living room walls felt strange, but I convinced myself that every family had its own traditions. Ours just happened to reward doctors. I told myself it wasn't personal. Not until it became personal. By 25, I had finished graduate school in art conservation and accepted a position restoring damaged paintings at the Franklin Museum. My first restoration project took 11 months and required rebuilding thousands of microscopic paint fractures beneath a magnifying visor. I earned $58,000 a year, lived in a modest apartment, and loved waking up every morning. My mother never once asked what I restored. She only asked when I planned to do something meaningful. Still, I kept trying. When Emily's white coat ceremony approached, Mom created a family group email titled Future Dr. Emily Celebration. On March 3rd, I replied at 7:42 a.m., confirming I would attend the ceremony, contribute $600 toward the reception, and arrive the night before to help decorate the banquet hall. My father replied, "Sounds good." Emily added 3 heart emojis. Even my Aunt Karen answered, looking forward to seeing everyone. I printed the confirmation email and tucked it into my planner because our family had a habit of rewriting history whenever memories became inconvenient. 3 weeks later, while discussing seating arrangements in front of my father, my Uncle David, and Emily herself, Mom smiled politely and said, almost as an afterthought, "You'll understand when you become someone." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile too. At the time, I thought she meant success. I didn't realize she meant becoming a doctor or becoming invisible forever. I remember the exact time because I had just finished documenting the final varnish layer on an 1884 landscape painting. The conservation lab's digital wall clock read 4:38 p.m. when my phone vibrated against the stainless steel work table. "Mom, don't come tomorrow. We've decided it's better if Emily's celebration stays focused on the doctors in the family." We don't want unnecessary questions. You'll understand when you become someone. I read it 3 times. Then I looked across the room. On the workbench beside me sat the carefully wrapped gift I had spent 6 months saving for, a German surgical atlas printed in 1912, professionally restored, with Emily's initials embossed in gold on a custom leather case. It had cost me $1,480, almost an entire month's rent. Next to it rested Grandpa Walter's small blue velvet box holding the silver stethoscope charm he had insisted I keep. The text on my phone and the gifts on the table occupied the same 2 feet of space. One represented everything I had tried to give. The other told me none of it mattered. I called my mother within 30 seconds. She answered on the second ring. Is this some kind of mistake? No. I already confirmed everything. We've reconsidered. I already paid for part of the reception. We'll reimburse you. I don't care about the money. There was a brief pause before she repeated the sentence I had heard my entire life. You'll understand when you become someone. The call lasted 2 minutes and 11 seconds. When it ended, the laboratory felt strangely quiet despite the constant hum of the climate control system. I carried the wrapped atlas back to my apartment that evening without opening it again. Grandpa Walter came over just after 7 p.m. He noticed the unopened gift before I said a single word. What happened? I handed him my phone. He adjusted his reading glasses, read the message once, then carefully placed the phone face down on the kitchen table. For several moments, he simply stared at the blue velvet box. I suppose, he said softly, they've decided medicine heals everything except pride. I expected him to become angry. Instead, he reached for the kettle. He made 2 cups of weak chamomile tea exactly the way he always did, adding 1 spoonful of honey to mine because he remembered I never liked bitterness. That quiet routine somehow hurt more than shouting ever could. He accepted what had happened without pretending it was fair. After he left, I sat alone until nearly midnight. Memories began arranging themselves differently. I remembered being 12 years old when my science fair ribbon was quietly removed from the refrigerator so my cousin's anatomy competition certificate could hang there instead. I remembered my college graduation dinner ending with 45 uninterrupted minutes discussing my brother's MCT scores while nobody asked about my honors thesis. I remembered introducing my museum director to my parents, only to hear my mother say, "Nora's creative phase has lasted longer than we expected." None of those moments had seemed large enough to protest. Together, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. The hardest realization wasn't that my family had rejected me. It was that I had helped them do it. Every nervous laugh, every subject I changed, every excuse I invented for them. I had mistaken silence for peace. In reality, silence had simply made the rejection easier to continue. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I stopped trying to explain my family to people who weren't living inside it. Instead, I asked for help. The first person I called was my father. He answered after 4 rings. "I got Mom's message," I said carefully. "Did you know she uninvited me?" A long silence settled between us. "I knew," he admitted. "You didn't think to call?" "I thought it was better to let your mother handle it." "Dad, I've done nothing wrong." "I know. Then why aren't you saying that to her?" His sigh sounded older than I remembered. "Nora, don't make it a thing. Emily has worked hard for this day. So have I. That's different." He wasn't cruel. That almost made it worse. He had spent 38 years learning that peace inside our family meant agreeing with the loudest person in the room. The conversation ended without either of us raising our voices. For the first time in my life, I realized kindness without courage could still leave someone completely alone. An hour later, I called Emily. I wanted my little sister to surprise me. I wanted her to laugh and say there had been some ridiculous misunderstanding. Instead, she sounded exhausted. "I told Mom this would happen," she whispered. "Then why didn't you stop it?" "I tried." "Tried how?" "I said you should come." "And?" "Mom said people would ask why the only non-doctor was sitting at the family table." The sentence landed harder than the text message had. Emily didn't defend it. She didn't agree with it. But she also didn't fight it. "Nora, please don't make me choose." I already wasn't chosen. Another silence. Finally, she said the same words Dad had used. Please don't make this bigger. When the call ended, I stared out my apartment window for nearly 20 minutes as traffic crawled through the afternoon rain below. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was making it bigger. Then my phone rang again. It was Daniel. We had met 3 years earlier when the museum hired him to build custom climate-controlled display cases. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't the kind of friend who rushed to solve other people's lives. He simply listened. I told him everything. The text, the ceremony, the silver stethoscope charm, the years of pretending everything was normal. When I finished, he didn't rush to comfort me. He asked one question. Nora, if this happened to someone whose painting you were restoring, would you tell them the crack wasn't real? No. Then why are you pretending yours isn't? I closed my eyes. Because he was right. You don't need permission to leave a room where you're only tolerated, he said quietly. But if it helps, you have mine. Something inside me settled. Not because the pain disappeared. Because someone had finally called it what it was. Rejection. Not misunderstanding. Not family stress. Not bad timing. Just rejection. That evening, at exactly 6:15 p.m., I wrote one final email to my mother. I offered the simplest compromise I could imagine. I told her I didn't need to sit at the family table. I didn't need to be introduced. I didn't even need to attend the reception. I would quietly sit in the last row during Emily's ceremony, leave my restored atlas with the wedding coordinator, congratulate my sister from a distance, and drive home before dinner. No speeches. No attention. No conflict. Just one sister watching another achieve her dream. Her reply arrived 14 minutes later. It contained only 63 words. If you come against my wishes, don't expect to be welcomed at future holidays. Your father will stay out of this. Emily deserves peace, not embarrassment. Stop forcing this family to choose between loyalty and drama. We've already made our decision. I read the message once. Then I looked at Grandpa Walter's silver stethoscope charm resting in its blue velvet box. For the first time in 9 years of trying to earn a place I had been born into, I understood something with complete clarity. You cannot negotiate your way into belonging. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is quietly stop asking for a seat at a table that keeps pretending it's full. I didn't answer my mother's email. I deleted 2 drafts before sunrise. The first read, "One day you'll realize what you've thrown away." The second was even harsher. "The only thing this family knows how to heal is its own reputation." Both were true, at least from where I stood. Neither would have changed anything. At 7:08 a.m. the next morning, I sent the only message that mattered. I won't attend. Emily deserves a peaceful day. I hope her career brings her joy. Please refund my $600 contribution to a medical scholarship in Grandpa Walter's name instead. I wish all of you well. My mother's reply arrived 11 minutes later. Noted. That single word closed a chapter that had taken 25 years to write. Life became surprisingly quiet after that. Quiet enough that I could finally hear myself. I accepted a promotion at the Franklin Museum, eventually becoming the lead conservator for European collections. Over the next 9 years, I restored 43 paintings, trained 6 junior conservators, and helped recover artwork damaged in a courthouse fire. My work appeared in journals my family never read, and that slowly stopped mattering. Daniel and I married in a small botanical garden with 48 guests. No seating chart ranked people by profession. Grandpa Walter walked me down the aisle with the tiny silver stethoscope charm hanging from my bouquet instead of around my neck. He smiled and whispered, "See? It was always a family keepsake, never a job title." He passed away 14 months later. The charm became the only inheritance I truly cared about. Then, in early October, an ivory envelope arrived. Emily was getting married. Inside was a handwritten note. "I know I don't deserve to ask, but I want my sister there. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology." I almost declined. Instead, I bought a navy blue dress and drove the 312 miles to the church where I hadn't been welcome for nearly a decade. When I stepped into the reception hall, conversations softened. Some cousins recognized me immediately. Others looked uncertain, as though they couldn't remember whether I was supposed to exist. I hugged Emily before the ceremony. We didn't discuss the missing years. Some things need presence before they need words. After dinner, my mother approached my table. Not dramatically. Not confidently. She waited. For nearly 18 minutes, she stood near the windows while I finished speaking with Daniel and two elderly relatives. For the first time in my life, she didn't expect immediate access to me. When I finally walked over, she looked older than 70 should. She tried her familiar smile. We should put all this behind us. It didn't work. She tried another. Families make mistakes. That one failed too. Then her shoulders lowered. The performance ended. She looked at the silver stethoscope charm resting against my necklace and asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you think your grandfather would have been disappointed in me?" It was the first honest question she had ever asked me. I answered carefully, "This isn't about what I need anymore." She waited. "If you truly want this family back together, start with Emily." Her eyes searched mine. She spent 9 years carrying the guilt of choosing silence because she thought pleasing you was the only way to keep the family together. Don't ask me for forgiveness before you freed her from that. She nodded. No excuses. No arguments. Later that evening, she asked Emily if they could talk privately. I never learned everything they said. Emily told me afterward that it was the first conversation in her adult life where our mother listened more than she spoke. Some moments deserve privacy more than witnesses. 8 months later, Sunday dinners returned. Not at my parents' house. At mine. Everyone brought something homemade. Nobody discussed salaries before dessert. Nobody introduced themselves by title. The silver stethoscope charm sat in a small glass bowl beside the bread basket, no longer belonging to doctors alone, but reminding every person who walked through the door that love isn't earned by initials after a name. My mother arrived carrying apple pie instead of instructions. She hugged Daniel before she hugged me. She asked my newest apprentice about restoring oil paintings with genuine curiosity. When Emily announced she had accepted a position at a children's hospital, my mother smiled proudly. Then she turned to me and asked if my museum had acquired any interesting collections recently. It was such a small question. It meant everything. Sometimes redemption isn't a speech. Sometimes it's simply learning to ask different questions. Today, the silver stethoscope charm still catches the afternoon light on my dining room table. It no longer reminds me of rejection. It reminds me of Grandpa Walter. Of 146 evenings, 312 miles, and 9 years that taught me the difference between approval and belonging. Because the strongest families aren't built by everyone choosing the same profession, they're built by choosing each other anyway.